Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Hospitality Hoot. This is a very exciting episode because we have our very first guest on the podcast. Her name is Morgan Raelin. She's a very good friend of mine and a bartender out of DC. In this episode, we talk about tipping cultures, pay structures, and general professionalism in the hospitality industry and how we can push that culture forward. As a disclaimer to those watching the video podcast on this episode, Morgan's video on Zoom wasn't up until about 20 minutes in, so she's not going to be a blank face for the entire episode. But besides that, no real issues here. So let's get into it. Enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Hospitality Hoot. This week we have our first guest, Morgan Raelin. Welcome, Morgan.
Hello.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So me and Morgan met by, basically we did that online Geneva tasting.
Yeah.
Where, they sent us little samples of Geneva, and then we did a Zoom tasting with Tonight's Poison. And then we started a little happy hour chat group where we kind of like Zoom and hang out and drink together. And
which I'm still not a part of.
Which you're not a part of. Hey, man, sometimes you got to be outside the circle.
That's what I get for not center.
Yeah, but it's been really fun. And me and Morgan ended up having a couple of really good discussions, whether about cocktails or just the industry as a whole. And we were having a discussion the other night, and I was like, you know what, let's just do this on the podcast, because I think that we can really dive into the subject a little bit. And I think that it's something that matters in the long term of our industry. So the topic that we're getting into is mostly about like tipping, the tipping culture, if we think that's going to go away. Some examples of restaurants or concepts that have kind of done away with tipping, and how that affects the pay rates of hospitality professionals in the long run.
Yeah. It's a big topic.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
I'm excited about this.
we were talking about that. Like, I mean, in an ideal world, like, do we like tipping? Like, do we like how things are going right now?
So I think that tipping is really interesting. So when the pandemic first started back in March of 2020, I noticed that the people who would go out are those dedicated regulars who tip really nicely, very generously. So for a while, I thought to myself, there's a shift between like working high volume and getting shit tip, and now like working zero volume, mostly takeout, but getting, like, I'm not joking when I tell you the neighborhood I worked in and the people who came in, they would be tipping like 50, 70 to 100%, which is wild. And obviously, like, because of that, I can say I like the tipping system, but in order to survive, it's so hard. And that's what we're really here to talk about, is like survival of the industry and people who work in it. Because now that things are reopening a year later, people are going back out, and there's all these confusions with checks at the end, because you have restaurants who are doing service charge, employee relief taxes. So like when you're a guest and you're reading all of that, basically you have your bill, and then you have a racket of tax buildup. And then on top of all of that, there's a little blank, the two little blank places where you can put your tip. And people usually end up tipping really poorly because they think that, the service charge and the employee relief is part of the tip, and it's really not. So yeah, this is a huge topic, because moving forward, restaurants need to be way more transparent about what servers are actually getting in their tips and what they're holding back.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's something that places are just kind of flying by the seat of their pants and just trying to incorporate things with no actual idea or plan in how much revenue it's supposed to bring in or what it's supposed to counter. They're like, well, just put a charge and that'll help out or something. You know?
And what are those fees actually going toward is what I want to know.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of similar to when in California they were banning plastic bags and you had to pay like 25 to 50 cents for a bag. And at these big chain grocery stores, you were expecting like 25 cents a bag. But then you would go to a Mexican restaurant or something and they would charge you a bag for your to-go burrito. And you're like, dude, you can't not put this in a bag. Like, what are you talking about? So, yeah, it's just kind of the Wild West right now. And everyone's doing it a little bit differently.
Post-pandemic salary and tip out. This was a unique situation for everybody, I think. And I think if tipping wasn't in place during COVID, we would have been screwed, or we would have just implemented tips back into the system again. I think if I owned a restaurant, I would, and we were doing, say, an automatic gratuity for my staff, I would then implement an additional tip option to help with them. Right. But I think talking post COVID, when things kind of get back to normal, like where do we see the industry? Where do we see, you know, because places around the country are doing elsewise, and it seems to be paying off pretty well. I haven't personally visited a place like that or worked for a place like that, but you know, you just hear things, and that system seems to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, so as a manager, wait, are you guys open? Are you both of you working right now?
So I'm actually just bartending right now.
And I'm taking a leave of absence.
Right.
And enjoying myself.
That's well-deserved, probably, if you're managing.
Yeah, I recently left my my current position as the general manager down here in San Diego. And it's been good. Give me some good downtime to kind of recalibrate myself and work on things.
But we have both worked as managers during, like, before and through the pandemic.
Okay.
It was definitely, I mean, I remember at first, the big thing was bartenders are getting screwed. Like, not just servers are obviously like making less money because of capacities, but bartenders were making almost no money because they had nobody at the bar. And then they'd be getting like the same tip outs from the servers, like anywhere from 6 to like 10% of drink sales. So as a bartender, you'd come in early, stay late, clean up, do all this prep, you know, make the drinks for the whole restaurant, and then leave with like $30. And
enough for an Uber.
Yeah, and then these servers are walking with like $200, you know, and they're complaining that they're not making as much as they were 2 months ago, but these bartenders are getting like peanuts basically.
I'm surprised they're not doing a pool system.
Well, that's the thing, is every single place I've stepped into is doing something different. When I was the bar manager at in Santa Cruz at this place called Suda, I was like, hey, let's do a pool system that's based on hours. So bartenders took tables and also did the drinks. Servers got trained on how to make drinks. Everybody ran their own stuff, so everybody was moving all the time. And so it was based on your basically your income producing hours, and that's how you get tipped out. And it was a full pool system all front of house. I think we also increased the tip out to kitchen staff as well to kind of help out there. And then when I went to when I first moved down to San Diego, it was still like 6% to the bartenders from the service staff over at the Edgewater, and the servers were just crushing it.
Yeah, they were doing very well.
Yeah, and bartenders had nothing.
I mean, as soon as Seth brought it to my attention that it's an issue, I mean, because I don't go and ask my bartenders how much money they're making. I just assume that they, you know, were making good money, getting tipped out well, because you just want to assume your servers know how to tip out. Come to find out, it was bartenders were getting shafted, getting stuck with the most work. Then we just try and, you know, implement a system from there, but trying to break down those walls of like, it's been this way for so long and this is the way we do it. And this is like the culture that they've basically built, to try and come in and say, well, you're going to be tipping this much now. Proved to be a little bit difficult for some of them, but I think in the long run, what we did is implemented off of drink sales only. I think they were tipping off of drink and food.
Yeah, they were basically getting tipped out like bussers. It was like 2% of all sales.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. And the current place I work at is doing another, it's kind of more complicated. Everybody basically puts 15% of their sales into the tip pool, and then anything outside of that you basically keep. And then that 15% gets distributed between everybody based on their hours. So, system that works, and apparently it worked out well enough for the bartenders that they weren't feeling like they were getting shafted, and the servers weren't like getting a huge chunk taken out of their pay. So everyone was pretty happy with it, actually.
What, do your bartenders get paid the same hourly, or how?
Yeah,
like,
I think everybody here gets paid 14 an hour, which is our minimum.
That's super nice.
Yeah, I mean, when I was managing my first spot, I was getting 15 an hour plus tips. So,
no, that's good.
And I did that for 2 years. And now I'm like just bartending and I'm basically making the same amount of money. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I can definitely make that work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the first like real, like legit raise that I got was during the pandemic when things started to open back up again. And I was bartending every single day. Like we lost a bunch of staff and I was bartending. I was basically opening and closing the place. And like you said, people were being very generous with their money at the time. They were tipping really high percentages to try to help out, especially because we were like a neighborhood bar and people were like, yeah, man, like I know like you guys are having a hard time. I've been fine because I'm doing real estate or whatever. And so like, I'll just help you out. And then the owner that I worked for hired me to build programs for the rest of his locations. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, I'm not going to get paid any less than what I'm making bartending, right? Like, what's the point in doing that? So I had been reporting all of like 100% of my tips, and I showed him a number and he thought it was a typo. I was like, no, that's really what I made. So if you want me to do all this, you're going to have to pay me a little bit more than that. So we locked it in and I got paid $35 an hour full time for basically like a contract. It was like 2 months to do all this, but it was like a good chunk of money just for that. So that's a very particular situation. I think it's, I don't know, it would be rare for somebody.
35 an hour is pretty high.
It's pretty good.
Even directing food and beverage, I didn't even make 35 an hour.
Yeah, it's like
how much do you make as a food and beverage manager, Austin?
I worked as a food and beverage director at the Hilton, and I was paid a salary base. It was about 68.
Okay.
And did you ever make tips?
I don't know what that broke down to. There were some times where I had to take tables, obviously, and shit hits the fan, but I would always give my tips to my servers. I'd just tip it out evenly.
That's nice, yeah.
Yeah. I never claimed tips as in a manager position.
Right.
So if Congress, or I guess not even Congress, I don't know who, but if people want to move away from the tip system, what is your initial reaction?
I think just talking about all the different policies that we already just discussed of like how variant it can be and confusing and just in the air. I think to streamline it would make a lot of sense. And it'd be more simple. It'd be more straightforward, and no beating around the bush with employers like saying you'll make this much because we estimate that you're going to make this much in tips. I think it would be a little bit more streamlined in the industry. I personally would go for it.
Yeah. But so I think the biggest thing I see with moving away from tips and moving to salary is that the way restaurants have it right now, it's pretty easy for them, right? Like they hire someone, they are only paying that minimum hourly, which doesn't really cost them much in tax. And then whatever the
Yeah.
server or bartender makes, that's on them. And they like that. I think they like having their hands free from that responsibility. Whereas if you
I certainly wouldn't put everybody on salary. I was thinking more along the lines of like an automatic gratuity, and still keeping them at kind of like the base rate, and just having our diners give an automatic percentage. To put everybody on salary would be expensive for
So
the
then
employers.
if you're a diner and you see your check and you got, your total and then you have the auto grat, like me, I don't really care because I'm in the industry and I understand why they're doing that. But for a lot of people, it's a huge like deal breaker, I would assume, for them to come back to a restaurant or something. I mean, if every
Yeah.
restaurant did it, they don't have a choice. But then that begs the question, like, well, then why isn't the grat built into the final check? And then, you don't have to have this awkwardness of here's your grat, add more if you want. Yeah.
I think, I mean, I'd be curious to see what your guys' like ultimate like vision would be for the industry. But personally, I think that we need some kind of like national restaurant like association that's like involved very deeply in opening restaurants and having to go through them in order to open, and basically tier your restaurant. It's like A tier, B tier, C tier. C being like, like a more entry level restaurant, like approachable, like an Applebee's, and then all the way up to A, it's like you got like French Laundry, things like that. So like to class your restaurant like on a national level, and then to like be required to abide by like the policies. Like A tier is going to be automatic gratuity of this much, when the lower tier, like C tier restaurant, could be whatever the policy may be. But I think that the industry should be a little bit more structured and like tiered, with the caliber of restaurant that you're opening. That way our diners actually go in knowing, well, this is, a nice spot. I'm going to be, I know going in, I'm going to expect to pay this automatically.
I mean,
I'm
I
curious
didn't
to see what you guys would think about where you see the industry.
The tier system, honestly, is probably a really organized way to do it.
Yeah, or like
But
any sort of classification of like, because right now, I mean, they have a lot of like tax-based things that are based on how many employees you have, which may be a little bit different than like what you're saying is basically cost of goods or style of service. Because if you want better service, you have to employ a lot more people. So
Yeah.
yeah. I have seen an example of a restaurant that tried to open and do automatic gratuity. They were very transparent about it. They put it on every check. Hey, don't tip because we already include gratuity in the price, and the prices were a little bit higher. And they closed down within like 4 months because
oh wow,
people just didn't like to be like they didn't like that they were automatically tipping 18%.
yeah,
It's shitty, like it sucks. But I think that people enjoy the freedom to tip whatever they want, like to tip either as low as 10 to 15% or to also be able to tip as high as 30 to 50%, it
right.
gives the diner kind of a little bit of power, and a little bit of control in their experience. I think that people have become very accustomed to that. So to launch a concept and include gratuity, it has to be, I don't know, I think you have to have some sort of a voice or influence on the narrative as a whole for it to make sense. Like you can't just be this little niche spot. It's like, hey, we're just going to do this over here, because then people will probably just not dine there.
Yeah.
It makes a lot more sense.
It's kind of an all or nothing situation, I think.
Mhm.
I think everybody needs to be on board, or it's just not going to work. So I think building like a national organization, how like like ABC goes out and regulates their liquor, or the health department regulates and slaps an A on your window when you pass. Every restaurant is regulated doing that. Why not have something like that for like the caliber of restaurant that you are? and what those kind of policies and pay structures are. I mean, personally, if I was to have a restaurant like, 11 Madison in New York, beautiful spot, I'm going to pay professional servers very well as a base, and I'm going to pretty much automatically grab the check.
Yeah.
And that way these guys are making an actual career out of it and not pinching pennies and trying to sucker,
Yeah. There's a
your
I think
guests
it's
money.
really interesting you just brought up the word career, because for me, I think like part of the reason people don't take hospitality seriously is because even for me, when I entered it, it was one of those, oh, it's an easy job, make as much money as I want, quit, go travel for 6 months, come back, work, make a lot of money, quit, go travel the world. But once you get sucked in, at least for me, it was one of those, like, this is going to be a profession, this is going to be my career for the next few years. But it doesn't feel good when you get a new job and you're talking about, I feel like it is a white elephant in the room when you're like, well, how much money will I make? Well, you'll make a minimum of $10 an hour, $15 an hour. Everything else is on you. And like, that's fine to take on that challenge, because that just means you have to be a better server, better bartender. But it doesn't give me the feeling and the satisfaction of like, this is a career. Like, this is my profession. This is the salary I get. Like, my first 2 years bartending, I made crazy money, and I was like, this is unreal. And then like the last 2 years, excluding COVID, or the last year, it was just kind of like, I'm not making anything, and this is so like frustrating, and I feel uncertain, and like, did I make the right choice? So yeah, I think that incentivizing people, or I guess telling more companies to take it more seriously and like maybe move to salary, is a good way to add more professionalism to hospitality.
Yeah, it's
like, you have the high tier places like, the aviary. Well, even them, like, I've heard some things that they don't get paid very fairly.
Mhm.
But like, that's the whole thing. You have all these high restaurants who are making millions of dollars a year, and they're still running on the same tip system as mom and pop restaurant down the street. Really.
Yeah.
So,
It's definitely disheartening. If you consider yourself a professional and you operate as a professional, and you step in somewhere and they're like, yeah, we're gonna just, like, you just get tips. You're like, well, I think I'm like worth a little bit more than that, And if you are really good at your job, you're gonna be spending a lot of time behind the scenes. You're not gonna be in like earning tips all the time, like it's kind of difficult. And then you're like, oh, all these bartenders or all these servers are making more money than me, and I'm doing way more work. Like it gets super disheartening, and it just depends. Like, you have to, you just have to kind of like luck out and get in the right spot, I guess.
right.
If the owners or the company culture actually, respects values industry professionals like that. I think a huge aspect of it is, they just don't know what they're supposed to pay. And I don't think they know how much their bartenders and servers make, because they're not reporting 100% of their tips. And that's why we do need more owner training. We need more industry run and owned bars. There's a really awesome example of this bar in Scotland. I think it's called the Panda Bar or something along those lines. And they allocate 20% of their profits and distribute it to the entire staff, which I think is super cool.
Is that in addition to what they already pay their staff?
It's in addition to what they already pay. So that gets distributed in bonuses.
Okay. Yeah, it's that's a really generous thing to do, and personally, like, I think that's worth it for them as a business.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for Bar Mini for a few months, and like, my biggest hiccup about accepting the position was that I was going to take a $20,000 pay cut, like, for real. Just because when you enter the job, you start off as a bar back, you just work your way up.
Mm-hmm.
They do a point system, so everything is pooled. Like, literally every person that's working there is in the tip pool. So you have Bar Mini, which is the bar. You have Mini Bar, which is the two-star Michelin restaurant. The chefs who are working there get in on that tip, right? So they have a point system of like 9. So there's 9 different point systems. Even the dishwashers get tipped out. So at the end of the day, I was getting the least amount of money because I was the newest member, but it was hurtful because I also found out that like not only are they like there's this complex tier system where like if you're new you get shit money, really, like you're there for the name of the place and blah blah blah, the experience and great. I also found out that they're considered a non-profit.
Whoa.
Which like blew my mind. I was like, what are you talking about? And the manager was like, well, every dime that we make goes right back into the restaurant. Like nobody gets it. And like I'm talking about a 2-star Michelin restaurant in DC, like one of 3, I think, here. So they're making millions of dollars and they can't seem to find the heart to take that 20% of their profits and redistribute it back to their staff. Instead, they put it back into the restaurant, which I understand, but you don't need to be putting back, I think, 100% of your profits if the people who are making you that money don't get any of it. Like it didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that's kind of an insane model.
Yeah, I think it was a tax write-off because it was nonprofit, but like I was pretty bitter about it if I'm being super honest. Like I was very upset. I was like, I'm already taking a pay cut by taking this position, and now I find out that you guys are making like millions of dollars without even considering the people who you are working. And mind you, our shifts are 16 hours. Like 11 in the morning till 3 in the morning.
Jeez.
Wow.
So it's just like, and our hourlies were shit. I think our hourly is like $4 an hour or something.
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting 100% of your profit back into the restaurant as business expenses, that tax write-off is way bigger than if you're paying payroll, essentially. So they were literally just saving money on taxes. I'm sure whoever owned it,
or they're just setting up a donation. They're donating to this cause and they actually own the donation. A lot of shady.
Man, I mean, that's how the rich get richer, though, right? It's just
I mean, like, it was really hard to talk out loud about that. I talk about it now because I'm sure they're going to change their system, and quite honestly, I don't work there anymore, so I don't have anything to lose. But like, I was just very confused because I know Jose Andres has his whole like the feeding the hungry, and like he has done a lot of great things that are charitable. But at the end of the day, if your staff feels gypped, how do you sleep at night? You know. You're known for how, and granted, like the tip system and the management is separate from him because he doesn't really take care of that. But he has to at least know and understand what's going on. Like you can't be feeding half the world and then your staff feels like, I'm overworked and underpaid. Yeah, it made no sense. I told my mom this, and she's like, I don't understand why you're working there. And I was like, oh, the prestige, the name, the experience on my resume. It's just like, and then COVID hit, and I'm like, well, why? That was such a stupid mentality. Like, I feel ignorant as a young bartender. Maybe I kind of felt taken advantage of. So,
yeah, sometimes you get catfished by these like bigger businesses. You're like, they're so like, I don't know. You're right. It's the prestige. Like, it's so.
I'm all for building a prestigious resume. I think that was a good move. Whether or not you got shafted a little bit, Morgan, I'm sorry, but it looks good on your resume in the end game.
Yeah. Well, I don't even, they have this is getting away from our topic, but I technically am not a bartender at Bar Mini because even though I worked there for 4 months, I didn't work there for a full year, which is part of the caveat. You have to work there for a full year to proudly say it. I say it because honestly, I worked so hard there and it just felt uneven. But anyways, back to what we were talking about, like you do have to keep in mind that like a lot of these fine dining restaurants are making huge profit and underpaying their staff. So like I think salary at this point, you could say most of the fine dining restaurants could be paying salary, and I'm sure some of them are, but there are a couple who are, I don't know, it's a little shady.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you guys think a fair salary would be for, say, a server at a place like that?
Oh,
I mean, what's like California's like average for the salary right now, like around 40, 45?
are you talking about like after tips?
Maybe gross.
Like I think,
Gross salary, maybe between 40 and 45 for a server
yeah,
in California.
for a year, I think it's
Yeah.
around that. It's like, I mean, I as a bartender, as like a full time bartender, I was making like just under 40 recorded.
Oh, okay. So maybe less.
So maybe it's like, yeah, around there. It depends on how much you work, honestly. Like if somebody's working
Yeah.
5 days a week, and they're a server, you could make as much as 60 grand in a year, but it just depends on the spot that you're at, what the price points are, how consistently you're working, and your average percentages. If you're in a city, I was actually just talking to my other bartenders at this place I'm at, and they had before the pandemic, they had a late night happy hour, which basically was like an industry hour, and they were serving food until like 1:30 a.m. And they said everyone was making like $45 an hour, like,
Wow.
Yeah.
and that's pretty insane.
Yeah.
That's a
The more I think about it, I kind of like the idea of going salary on. I mean, especially for some of these nicer spots, to put your staff on salary to kind of build that vision of like, you're in a career. It's like you worked up to something. It's like maybe you went from like a tier restaurant to the top tier restaurant, whatever the case may be, but to work your way up and land something like a salary position as a server. I think that's something that people would work hard for. I kind of like the idea of having a salary
it makes
restaurant
sense for those
for your
places
staff.
that have very standardized service where you're not really getting a different experience, depending on which server you're going to get. So for everybody to be putting out this same amount of work and the same amount of quality assurance, and then to basically just roll the dice on whatever customer you have at that moment to decide what you're going to make that day, it definitely makes sense to standardize that, include gratuities and pay a salary or something like that. I know that Employees Only in New York has a tier system for their bartenders as well. Like you have to wear your like bartender apprentice jacket for a year before you can get your bartender jacket at least or something like that. So, you know, it's interesting. I don't think it works it can't really work for everybody, especially these kind of like mom and pop, a little more casual
Yeah,
spots.
they're already struggling to pay labor as is.
Right. But these, especially the hotel bars, I think, because they always have so much more money to dish
Yeah.
out because they got their whole hotel operation. So,
Yeah, the food and beverage in the hotels is just like icing on the cake.
mhm.
They're making money off of rooms alone.
Yeah. But so I guess I mean, like salary sounds nice for more established places, but how do we address places like the mom and pop shops where you know that they're not going to be able to pay salary for even hopefully a manager, but most of the time from what I've seen is those managers get hourly, that's pretty high. And then there's servers and bartenders get tips. So like, they can't exactly hire 5 servers. Like your salary is going to be 30K
Mhm.
and you don't get like tips. Like
It definitely, like, I think that the owners should consider salaried positions for obviously their GM or bar manager and their chef. I think those are like the 3 positions that are full time, a lot of times more than full time. You're working anywhere from 50 to 60 hours a week. And if you're not getting overtime, I don't know, it could benefit both people because it benefits the owner to not have to pay overtime. It benefits the employee because you have full time and you can get benefits and you have a salary that you can count on. I think that part of it is training owners on what they should be paying people.
Labor cost.
And then the other thing is training bartenders or people who are becoming bar managers, or other managers, GMs, whatever, to negotiate for salaries when they step into a job. You know, I know when I got my first managing position, I had no idea what I was supposed to get paid. He was like, 15 an hour, you know, there's some manager duties, you know, you get to earn tips, you get to like work the best shifts, whatever. And I was like, cool, yeah, sounds great. I just want to take the job. And I was stuck in that $15 an hour for 2 years and ended up really burning me out because I was like, dude, I'm not making
working more.
nearly as much money as I should be, you know, for the amount of work that I'm doing, for the amount of money that I've made this guy, you know. Maybe the first few months where I wasn't that good at it, but after a year and a half, I was like, okay, I'm like pretty efficient at this. So yeah, I started taking
Were you
other
able
work.
to talk to him about a raise, or was that out of the question?
It's he was just known for like not giving raises, so I just never like asked for one.
Good reputation.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even get paid overtime. That's like,
Ouch.
That's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, if you're a restaurant owner and your staff is in between $22 to $25 an hour hourly, then if they're not already on salary, then you're making a mistake and you probably shouldn't be owning a restaurant.
Right.
So you're going to be paying them more than if you were to just put them at a base salary. An executive chef, I know I'm going to be having working overtime. I'm going to be having my manager work overtime. I'm not going to pay him, you know, $45 an hour to do, you know, a job that he's not. Yeah. It's just, if you're not putting your management at salary after that point, so you're making over like $22 an hour.
Yeah.
You've made a mistake.
It's also, it's different, like, depending on the population of your city. Like, I was technically in a small town, and any restaurant you worked at, like, no one was getting paid salary. Everyone was hourly, and nobody even had benefits. Like, people were working full time, never got benefits. It was kind of like restaurant owners kind of like talked together, and they're like, no, we don't pay overtime. Like, it was just this thing in the town, like nobody got paid right. So like when I came down to San Diego and everyone's offering like health benefits and stuff, I'm like, wait, what? Like, that's a thing? You can get health insurance as a bartender? Like, that's insane.
Yeah. I mean, the first time I was offered health insurance was when I worked for the hotel, and I was like, oh. And then I started opening up my eyes more and realizing there are other restaurants that aren't hotels that also offer health benefits. But that's like, yeah, it's all very confusing. I think like solving this problem is going to be like take a couple years.
I mean, probably a couple
like
decades, honestly. Like,
unfortunately,
to get everybody on board is going to be a challenge in its own.
Yeah.
Sure. Have you guys ever worked in a place that did gratuity-based tips only?
I've never worked.
I did, and it would have been so good, but it some of it went to the house, and so the staff ended up getting shafted. But the model was so good because, I mean, it was like a membership club, and you know, they came in and they had like a member account, and they assumed that all the tips was going straight to the server. Sure enough, most of it was going to the house, and the server was making, I mean, less than somebody who's working at a Denny's. But if the house wasn't being shady, they would have done very well. Because I know I did a couple dinners, and you do it, you know, a 12 top, their automatic gratuity could be $200, $300, $400 or more. I'm curious, what is like the most you guys have ever been tipped out as bartenders?
Talking about like one day?
Do you have a story that just like jumps out at you, like this one time served this guy?
Yeah, you mean you're talking about like one instance, right? Like one transaction.
What's the most somebody's ever tipped you guys out?
Dude, I've been tipped a hundo for one drink before.
Yeah, that's about. I think I have similar, like someone's like tipped me $100 flat, regardless of what their check was, and they were only drinking, and I think they had like maybe 3 cocktails.
Yeah.
They just like straight up, they handed me $100. I was like, do you want change? And they're like, no, this is your tip. So like that kind of experience, you know, I know a lot of people have that kind of relationship with their regulars. I can see like backlash with bartenders, like getting away from the tip system, saying, well, what about the people who come in and order literally like a Hemingway daiquiri and then they give me $50?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I still think that they'd be willing to give you $50.
Yeah.
I do too. I guess it's just it is a scary thing to change, because even though it's kind of shit and you can get shafted a lot, I think as a bartender you really learn how to hustle in the moment.
Yeah.
Or even as a server. So
Well, sometimes like I think that people stay in this industry for like those highs. You know,
Yeah.
you have those crazy nights. Like I had a night one time. It was a really busy night. He was like, "Hey, bro, if you take care of me, I'll take care of you." I was like, "Okay, sounds good." Got him a drink.
I heard that before.
Yeah, but
yeah. I was like, let's go one or each way.
This guy wasn't fucking around, dude. He would order one drink, give me $100. I'd give his change back. He'd be like, "No, keep it." He did that for 3 rounds, and I was like, "Geez, all right." Like we were doing a tip pool at that time, so I didn't see 100% of it, but that was that sort of thing. And when you work nights like that and it's such a high, or you work like a really busy night and you have a lot of like nice friendly people, and you can walk out with anywhere from $300 to like $600 on a good night. But then the same week you'll have a Sunday that you make $40, so people always talk about their highs. They don't always talk about their lows, or even like consider to average it out.
Yeah.
Bartenders will tell a lot of their friends like, "Oh, dude, I made $500 the other night." It's like, yeah, well, what did you make the last 3 months? Like, what did you make in January? It all evens out. Nobody's making like 80 grand a year just bartending. Like that just doesn't happen.
So I am curious, like with bartending, there's also club bartending. Like I don't think if you're a club bartender, moving to salary is going to be really shady.
Mm-hmm.
Only because, and I'm not trying to be judgmental, but club owners are not necessarily the most transparent when it comes to money.
Yeah.
I've worked for a club, and like I feel like they figure out the money. So you, at the end of the night, you turn in all your cash, you turn in all of your tips, and then they divvy it out.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how would that work? Like, I can't imagine a club hiring bartenders, but like, your salary is this, even though I'm sure they could afford it because clubs make bank.
It's also like all volume.
Like, how do you categorize that?
Like, there's just so much volume. I've actually been considering this, like, how can you put the terms of like a bartender and what they're doing, and put it in terms for like the regular, I don't know, other, translated to other industries. And the way I see it is, basically, as a bartender, you're a salesman, and you make an average commission on your sales, if you think about your tips that way. So what somebody like at a club could do, you look at a bartender's sales, total sales, and then you get a flat rate commission off of those sales, right? So instead of just making whatever you're tipped out, you get an 18% commission on the sales for the night. And that's a good way to kind of even that out. Or I don't know, just just another way to think about it, I guess.
I mean, it's good because it would incentivize that bartender to get the highest sales. And, as a club owner, whoever does that, you're probably going to want around more.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's so many different flavors of this, and I think that's why it's like kind of confusing. And it really just depends on like where you've been and what you've done. All restaurants are not created equally. All bars are definitely not created equally. That's why I think like a tier system may work, but it might even be like too broad of a brush.
Yeah. The more you start to think about it, all the variables start to come into play, and it's just everybody's got their own unique story, and their environment's different. And,
But I think there should be more kind of standard things. Like I love it when people come to a bar and they're like, "Have you taken like professional training?" It's like, nope. I just kind of started doing this. And there's nothing that really separates like a good bartender from a great bartender, right? You could have somebody that's been bartending 10 years, but they've been working at their local dive, or somebody that's been bartending 10 years at like a Michelin star restaurant or a world's 50 best bars or that sort of thing, or a city versus a small town. There's no way to really gauge what level of expertise you're at. And I think that
Yeah.
is a kind of a contributing factor to this lack of professionalism in our industry. You know, when you start a new job and you step back behind the bar, there's always going to be another bartender there. And there's always like this kind of silent interaction where you're like, are you a bartender like I'm a bartender, or are you just like, or do you just flirt with everybody and give them shots?
Yeah.
You know, there's just that kind of like little, I don't know, it's a silent thing.
Do you think that it would be easier to like have this all move to more salary because you know how the current administration has just passed minimum wage for $15 an hour. So I'm perplexed to hear when someone's like, well, servers only get paid $7.
Oh,
And I'm thinking, well,
I know what you're talking about.
like I'm confused because why can't we make it that every service industry worker, you know, I think moving to salary is something that we'll talk about and organize like in 5 years. But like for now, you know, there is a law saying minimum wage is $15 an hour. What's wrong with giving every single service industry worker 15 an hour? And then, you know, servers, I mean, is that unfair?
Well,
to like, if your dish is making 15 and your servers are making 15, but then they also have an additional like ability to make more on tips?
well, I mean, front of house has always kind of made more money than back of house. And over the
Right.
years, you know, the back of house salaries or hourlies have been slowly going up, right? Like a good line cook will usually make like $18 an hour if you're, you know, in a spot like that. And a lot of times they'll technically make a better hourly than your bar manager, but the bar manager can make tips. So it is kind of weird. My opinion is if you can do that for your back of house, why not do that for the front of house?
Yeah.
And then tips could get split between everybody, front and back of house.
Well, if it was honestly split, like tipped out to the back of house, tipped out to bartenders, like it, I feel like that would be a pretty fair system and it'd be pretty easy to transition to.
Yeah. I'm
like what's holding up restaurants from paying that 15 an hour to everybody?
Yeah, I don't like hate servers or anything, but I think that servers are like I think servers are kind of like overpaid and they complain a lot.
Yeah.
You know.
I personally think, and I know you guys know the same thing. As a bartender, you know, you are a server and a bartender, and you should be compensated more for that. I think from the company aspect should be paying you more because it's a more involved profession. And I don't think that it's really being seen that way. I think there are some situations where, you know, Michelin star restaurants, your servers are, you know, top tier. I mean, these guys go through serious training, and all that good stuff. But in a normal kind of establishment, your bartenders are essentially your servers. You know the food menu, you know all the ingredients, and plus you got to know how to make all the drinks. You got to know all the beer product, all the wine product, and to be compensated from the business the same as your server next to you who doesn't have all that other knowledge, I think is lacking that professionalism that we were talking about. So I think those positions should be compensated more from the company themselves, or get that higher percentage on the pool.
I feel like
whatever the case may be.
And I absolutely agree with that. And servers would hate that you said that. You know?
There are certain servers who I truly feel that are phenomenal, hands down. Like the restaurant operates because of them. Places like 11 Madison, or you know, Mr. A's down the street from us, or like French Laundry. These places are top tier.
Servers can't be too upset because I would say that the biggest difference with serving and bartending is that servers do tend to get a higher check average. Like without a doubt, just because of the food that's added on. Usually, like a bar, I probably more likely get two tops and one tops at the bar, whereas servers, you can hit that like that party of five, party of
Hmm.
six, you know? So
Yeah, they definitely get higher
yeah,
check averages. I think that like a high
yeah.
echelon like bartender, like craft bartender, should be considered in the same vein as like a sushi chef or something because you're making it all, but you're also like face to face,
Serving.
and you're kind of you're doing both jobs. You're both the cook and the server at the same time. So your sales are directly attached to your productivity, whereas servers, their sales are directly connected to other people's productivity.
Mhm.
Um,
They have some power to upsell
yeah,
at the table,
Yeah.
but yeah,
but they're not spending any time making it, which is why they have more. Like they can get higher checks, they can turn more tables, they can make more sales because all they're doing is sales. They're not in the
Hmm.
product. They're not in the production line, essentially.
Right. They're not making the food and they're not making the
Right.
drinks.
So that's why I think something like either a higher, a slightly higher tip out to bar and kitchen, or just higher, like a couple of dollars an hour more for a bartender. I think like
Yeah.
based on what your expectations are, as a company.
I think that so what you're saying right there, I think already happens a lot. Bartenders do get a little higher hourly than their servers. Like the hotel bar that picked me back up during COVID, they try to hire me as a server because technically they hired everybody who was a bartender because we're short staffed. We only needed three people. So you need to be able to bartend and serve.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd alternate. But they try to do a little sneaky thing where they're like, you're hired as a server. That hourly was five. Whereas if you're hired as a bartender, it was higher, it was
Mm.
10. So it already happens where like if you're titled as a bartender, you're gonna get a little higher hourly. The problem is like to me, $10 an hour doesn't justify if I make $70 in tips that
Right.
night. Because I think that I don't know, like I'm still making over 100. Um, I don't know.
It's just weird.
It's
It
so
doesn't seem
complex.
really
So
thought out.
complex.
It,
Yeah. Well, it doesn't seem thought out, and also it just like it doesn't make you feel like you're working. It's just like, all right, I'm here to do a
mm-hmm.
task and I get paid a certain amount versus like, all right, I'm here as a professional. I'm here to sling these drinks. I'm here to clear the table. Like I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like right now, it just feels like they barely wanted to give everybody 10 and then everything else you make is on you,
Right.
which is
And the
so how do you hold places accountable for like that poor mentality of like, we'll give them the minimum and then they can figure out the rest.
it's really difficult, and especially in a lot of other places where where there's a server wage, right? I mean, if you go to like Tennessee, the server's wage is like 350 an hour or something like that, and then and then it's all tips. If the minimum wage goes up federally and that server goes from making 350 an hour to making 15 an hour, like that's a huge like
when
that,
your rent is like $400.
right? Like that's insane versus being in California where you're like, okay, my minimum just went from 14 to 15 and I'm paying like 1200 in rent, like
Right.
that's
Yeah, I'm moving to North Dakota.
yeah, right. I'm gonna go buy a house.
Yeah, yeah. Gonna live very largely.
Yeah, so
I think it comes down to the fact that, businesses are struggling right now. And the restaurant industry has been struggling for a while to get people in the doors. And, everybody's in this mindset of, I got to dump prices to get people in
mhm.
here. And I think it comes down to our customers and our guests who are dining with us. They're looking to save a buck when they're going out to dine. And I think that mentality and that just the way of dining nowadays has changed, and everybody's trying to be in like big competition with, I'm going to have the cheaper, better food. And I hate to see it go that way because that's why shit rolls downhill. And, if our guest is not coming in willing to spend, $20 a person, your servers are not going to be tenured. They're not going to be paid well. So you're not going to get a good staff. You're going to get terrible service. And it's just like this big mess of, this is all shit because the customer isn't willing to actually go out and dine and splurge a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're getting close to an hour, so let's just get some last thoughts. If we have any like closing thoughts, what we want to see, what we'd like to see in the long term, when we think this is going to happen, or if we ever think it's going to happen, and what it's going to take.
I'll go first. I think for me, the best way to start this movement or like this change of mentality, and like I don't know what to say, because you did bring up a good point. If you're in California, you're already getting $14 an hour. That $1 raise is not enough. Whereas like if you're in DC and you get $2.75 an hour, that 15 is huge. I do think that the best way to start this is to increase everybody's hourly, to get rid of the stupid service charge, because you don't know where that's going. Unless your restaurant's really honest and transparent, we'll be frank and say that most places are not honest with the service charge. I think that's some bogus. I think that needs to get gone. I think that tipping still needs to happen, or like it will still be a thing. I think you're going to have a hard time moving servers and bartenders away from that mentality, because in order to secure them to want to make sure that they understand, like, this is the salary. Like, I, as a bartender, can make $60K behind the bar. I don't need the tips. Like, that's impossible to do right now because restaurants probably can't figure out that money wise. This is a very long finishing thought, because it's just like you start thinking about one thing and it leads to another thought.
It's a complex issue for sure.
Yeah. But I would say that increasing the hourly, getting away from that, like, enough to pay your taxes off, is so bogus. Like, I'm there. If I'm bartending, I'm probably there for 12 hours. So like, I would like to get paid for the time that I spent, not just enough to pay off my taxes and then my tips are what I make my money off of. So that's my big thing. I want to hire hourly. Tips are just bonuses. I think tips should be more evenly distributed among front of house, back of house, especially servers, because like you're saying, they're not necessarily putting out the work. They're just serving it. So they're not producing. Right.
Austin, thoughts?
Oh man. I come into this thinking I have a good understanding about what I think this, an easy answer would be, but I do kind of like the idea of going tiered, and just being regulated nationally. When some place is opening a restaurant, I think it'd be awesome to see, and have those tiers come in with different pay structures and have to abide by it on a national level, and be regulated and checked and audited, to hold restaurants accountable to be consistent throughout everybody and throughout all the other restaurants in the industry. What those are, I'm not sure. Being a lower tier mom and pop restaurant, you're operating this way. And all the other mom and pops are operating this way. This one, you guys are more corporate owned. You have, you're to abide by this kind of tip out policy and this salary policy. And these, more fine dining, top tier, professional career oriented restaurants, you're going to operate this way. So I think just to categorize them and regulate it on a national level would be something cool to see. I'm not sure where I stand on, the amount of salary that somebody should be making, but I definitely want to move in the direction of promoting professionalism in the restaurant across the board. I think that society is not looking at it in the right way, in the right state of mind. All too often do you see somebody come in and say, well, what are you going to do long term? What's your end game? It's like, well, why can't a bartender have enough, to manage their money accordingly, put together a nice nest egg and actually retire? And it is a career, and I want to move in that direction. What that is, I don't think that there's an answer. I'd be curious to see what our viewers think and what you guys think. But yeah, that's where I stand. No firm answer.
Right. Yeah. We all have like our dreams and like the things that we hope to do, and we love this industry, and that's why we're in it. But I think that, you know, the love isn't it's not sustainable. you can't pay your rent on love and just enjoying stuff and your passion. So absolutely, I think there should be an incentive for people to continue to grow in their role and take it seriously and see a career in it. And there's a lot of opportunities for people, but it's unfortunate that you have to get really creative about it if you want to make this job a career, right? This is not a side gig. This is not a side hustle. This is my real job. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I'd like to be taken seriously about it. So I think you're spot on about changing the public's perception about the job, what it takes to do this, that it is a skilled kind of position. It is definitely skilled. It takes a long time to master. It should be taken seriously. It's also about training owners into like what they should be paying people. I think that we need to be honest about how much we make. It's been like the best kept secret for a long time. People working the summer months and the holidays, and then they take like 3 weeks off in January. Some people have that kind of setup with their life, and they just save their cash. But I think that we just need to be honest and talk to more industry people and be open about what we make, because I don't think that it should be what's the word, like a faux pas to say how much you make. I think it should be transparent, and that's the only way we're going to make progress, because if you don't talk about it, then the people who are dishing out the paychecks they have absolute control of what they can pay you, right? They're going to pay you whatever they want. I think that tipping is going to stay. I think it's what makes our industry thrive, and it brings a lot of personality to places. But I definitely think that most places should be shifting towards a more communal approach to their tip outs, and that's from front and back of house. I think that back of house also deserves some of that. So yeah. Big dreams, a lot of ideals, but I think that with the direction we're going, just creating more discussion about it and working with more like owners and stuff like that, it'll give us a good opportunity to change these things on a small scale, and hopefully that'll turn into, I don't know, bigger things in the future. So anyways, I want to thank you guys for recording this with me. Morgan, thank you so much.
I'm honored to be your guys' first guest.
Thank you. It was fun. I appreciate it.
I think we picked the hardest topic.
Definitely. I mean, there's no. Yeah. I don't know. It's all loose ends from here.
I feel scatterbrained. I was like, I have all these thoughts, and I don't know what to say.
It's all right. Maybe we'll do something else. We'll do like a follow-up episode or something like that.
I think it would be interesting, for this particular topic, to get an array of people. So you got your bar managers, your restaurant bar owner, some guests, like what you would consider guests, and then of course your bartenders and servers. Because I would have liked to hear server side. I obviously, when I talk about pay and everything, I'm more like bartender mentality. And it would be interesting to see the reactions of servers, like whether they want to help contribute to the conversation or they like it the way it is, because they make their money and they leave.
Our servers are going to talk so much shit on Morgan. Oh yeah. I'll look at getting a server on.
Sorry, all you servers. There's just so much more responsibility as a bartender,
Yeah. So. Morgan, where can people reach you, or if they want to follow you, where are you at, and what's going on in your life right now?
You can find me on Instagram. COVID has given me the chance and time to really develop my photography skills, so check that out. I'm in DC right now, so I work for an Amaro distillery called Don Ciccio Figli. Yeah, if you're in DC, come by. We're only open once a week. I don't know who will be listening, but yeah, mainly if you want to ever reach out to me, I'm on social media the most. Facebook I don't really use, and I don't have a Twitter. So when I say social media, I guess I really just mean Instagram.
Yeah.
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 I'm the same way.
And your at's just Morgan Raelin, right?
Yes, sir. Raelin. Should I spell it?
Yeah, sure. Spell it.
MORG. It's gonna be MORGAN_Raelin RAELIN.
Perfect. Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. Yeah. We'll see you guys.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Austin.
Thank you, Morgan. Nice to meet you too.
I honestly, when I first was gonna do this podcast, I couldn't think of a solution, but I really, really like your tier system idea. I think it's very comprehensive. And I think like if this does like change like the way people want to do their pay structure, it is probably the most organized way. So I liked hearing that.
Maybe. There's still so much that could happen that needs to be involved.
Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Hospitality Hoot podcast. Just remember, you can find us on Instagram at White Owl Hospitality. And if you're a bar or restaurant owner looking to expand your concept, you can find us at whiteowlhospitality.com. Thanks for listening, guys. Go ahead, give this episode a like, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on Instagram if you want to interact or if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.